Ever wondered how safe your online activities really are? How secure is your digital footprint? In the vast realm of the internet, privacy and security are paramount. Without adequate protection, your personal data might be at risk. There are solutions to these issues, and today we're going to talk about two of them. Introducing Liberty laptops from CALIX Solutions. These cutting-edge devices are meticulously designed to bolster online privacy, providing you the liberty to surf the internet incognito. The World Wide Web can be a wild frontier, but with Liberty laptops, your online privacy is always protected. We also present you crypto laptops, designed with cryptocurrency users in mind. Equipped to support a myriad of wallets and exchanges, these laptops are tailored for seamless cryptocurrency transactions. They offer enhanced security protocols to keep your digital assets safe. Crypto laptops ensures a secure and smooth cryptocurrency experience. It's time to take control of your online privacy and security. Venture over to CALIX Solutions and explore our Liberty laptops and crypto laptops. Don't forget, our affiliate program lets you earn $50 per sale. Visit calixsolutions.io now or call 7028458276 for more information, because your online safety is our priority.
And I am blurry. What the hell, camera? Come on now. There we go. Much better. Good morning, everybody. Favorite truck driver, ex-truck driver in the whole wide world. It's Bitcoin Ben. All right, guys and gals. I'm going old school. I think the issue we're having here in the world is that we don't know our history. Now, when I say our history, hang on one second, Red Bull time. And I'm blurry again. Come on, you camera. I think I need like an AI camera. Because apparently AI fixes everything. Hang on a second, zoom in. There we go. All right. Is when I say our history, what I mean is humanity's history. Not England, not America, not Mexico, not Africa. I mean human history. And what is relevant right now is organizations, 150-year-old organizations that have set the society of the last 150 years. That's what they've done. Because around 1850, 1860-ish, there was this new group. Well, I say new, but they were remnants of an old Age of Enlightenment group. The new group had a plan for the 19th century, or I'm sorry, the 20th century, which would be the 1900s, 1901 until 1999. That's the years that they were focused on. Now, where we're at now is the next generation of that. And there are two separate groups right now. There are two separate groups that are at war for the control of the next probably 1,000 years. And I use the number 1,000 on purpose. But in order to really grasp where we're at now, we have to know how we got here and the methods and operating procedures that they used in order to get us here. See, you and I, we're just ordinary people. We aren't the elites. We aren't the organizers of societies. We aren't the organizers of the countries. Once you realize that everything that has happened, including World War XI, that gal is so fucking dumb. She literally said World War XI as she read World War II. See, that also shows us our elected representatives. They're just newscasters. They're reading a script. What we need to realize is that we are we are at a point right now, an inflection point where, and what's really sad is we don't really have a good option. As always, no one ever is like, hey, let's try freedom. Let's try less laws. Let's try less government. No one's ever saying that option. Because as much as I like Trump, I gotta be honest, guys, it looks like he's leading us into the next system, and the next system is led by corporate elites instead of governmental elites. That's the two systems. We have the governmental elites, the Washington elites, and we have the technocracy elites, the corporate elites. Now, in the old system, it was a union of the governments and the corporations. Well, now the corporations are breaking away from the government, and the government is losing influence over the people. Because you have to realize that X and like Facebook and TikTok, they have more influence over the people than the governments do. And since there are so many different platforms, the government can't really, they can't really control all of the platforms, especially now with X. Now, mind you, X under Elon Musk, there is still information controls. It isn't free speech. It's their speech. And their enemies' speech that they use as leverage against them. Because X is more I hate to even use the word libertarian. X is not really libertarian. X is the technocracy aligned agreement talking points. That's what X is. And libertarians, I got bad news for you. The fact that we are libertarians means we are going to lose. And I'll tell you why. Because libertarians are horrible at organization. The fact that we're libertarians means we're anti-organization. We are anti-central power. We are anti-systems over large swaths of people. So guess what works? Organizations over long swaths of people. That works. Humans, they join groups or crowds. And once you're in a crowd, you're in a tribe. Once you're in a tribe, you fight for your tribe. We are programmed like that. That's how our mind works. There's safety in numbers. That's the whole humanity basis of where we're at now. We could completely disagree with the group, but we'd rather be in the group than outside of the group, even if we disagree with the group. Because odds are the lion ain't gonna get meat. There's less weaker people that the lion's gonna chase. And that's what the elites and the psychiatrists and all of the medical industry and the psychology industry has figured out. I mean, we have to realize that our government, since after the Civil War, especially about 1930-ish, 1920, early 1920s into the 30s, really ramped up the idea that government should have a study on the psychiatry of the American people. They were learning how to manipulate us. And this is not a joke. There was I think it was a $250,000 grant for a university to, quote unquote, study which ketchup we preferred. The government has been figuring out chemically and psychologically how to manipulate us, because they want us under control. They want us in the group. They don't care if it's Republican or Democrat. Doesn't fucking matter, because this group and this group are controlled by this group. The right and the left all have leaders. They're all elites, but they're elites with different priorities. And we're right in the middle of the war. We have the right and the left. Like I said, there is no freedom party. There is no get rid of the government party that even has a chance, because they knew that humans will group. So they just had to create the groups. Like I've said, who wins every NFL game? The owners. The owners win every NFL game. If the Rams are actually playing the San Francisco 49ers, guess who wins? The owners. Because they don't care which one really wins, as long as there's a bunch of people watching it. They have asses in the seats. So, all right. Now, before I roll into one of the groups we're going to learn about, because what I'm going to do over the next few months is I'm really going to lay out the history of how we got here. And I also want to give little nuggets that I see as relevant on where we're going. Let me bring this up real quick.
Arab Emirates has announced that it's going to withdraw from the Organization of Petroleum Exporters The United Arab Emirates has announced that it's going to withdraw from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. That includes the bloc's broader alliance, OPEC+. Now, that move comes as Gulf countries face unprecedented economic disruption after the US and Israel war on Iran. The UAE has released a statement saying this decision aligns with the UAE's long-term strategic economic vision and the development of its energy sector. It's also driven by national interests and the country's commitment to actively contributing to meeting the urgent needs of the market stemming from disruptions in the Arabian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, which impact supply dynamics. The stability of the global energy system depends on the availability of flexible, reliable, and affordable supplies. Let's bring it Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane. He's live for us in Berlin. What are we to make of that statement, Dominic?
On the face of it, it's something that really concerns the United Arab Emirates. Why should people in Europe really be concerned about it? Well, for several simple reasons. This continent is already experiencing a certain degree of concern at the governmental level about the supply of oil and other fuels. Several different countries in different ways have been intimating they fear a shortage of different kinds of oil cropping up in the course of the next few months. Certainly the Swedes were the latest to express a degree of concern. Their economy minister was speaking precisely about the topic today, saying that jet fuel is something to really be concerned about. So when you then bring it back to the stated reasons for that departure of a founder country, as my colleague was just alluding to, then you get the sense that here in this continent, at least, there's great concern, as I was saying. And why does it matter in this continent? Well, OPEC is based in Vienna, in Austria, and they will be meeting, OPEC and OPEC Plus will be meeting in Vienna tomorrow, where on the face of it, it will be the last time where the emissary, the ambassador from the UAE will take their seats and look around the table at the other members and consider, well, I will be leaving there. But from Friday, no more UAE representation in OPEC or in OPEC Plus, organizations that the UAE has been involved in for decades.
Al Jazeera's Dominic Kane reporting live there from Berlin. Many thanks indeed to Dominic. Here's a closer look at what OPEC actually is. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries was formed in 1960 by Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, but it expanded to include the UAE, Algeria, Libya, Nigeria, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and the Republic of Congo. OPEC members are responsible for around 40% of the world's oil. That could be more than 30 million barrels a day. The group meets to set oil production targets and to manage global oil prices for the group. OPEC Plus combines the original members with an additional 10 countries, including major oil producer Russia. Kingsmill Bond is an energy strategist at Ember Futures. He explains this decision for us in greater detail.
It is a very clever moment to do it when there's an oil shortage anyway, and therefore they are preparing themselves clearly for the period after the war, because now that we've obviously reached peak oil demand and we're entering into a new environment, they want to be free from the constraints of OPEC to do what they need to do. The UAE is, I would suggest, preparing for a world after the Iran war where oil demand is in decline and OPEC's power to maintain control and discipline will consequently be weaker. And it's a very rational move on their part.
Okay. Hang on one second. Now, let me explain what that was. Number one, the UAE was one of the first to join the OPEC because the OPEC was created after World War II. After the Allies reorganized the Middle East And they put in their leaders all over the Middle East. That's when they implemented OPEC. This is America and England that led this. Let me say this. The countries involved in OPEC, all of them were ran by the global progressive movement, including Iran. See, we think we're at war with Iran. The Iranians, they're not Iranians. Number one, they're Persians. Iran did not exist until World War II. There was no Iran. It was Persia. The whole area was Persians. The global elite of the time around World War I and World War II, they were setting up for the new system. That new system was oil-based. It was oil and petroleums. That's what their system revolved around. That was their purest source of energy, was oil. So everyone agreed that they would set up the new system actually based on oil. Now, what's going on now is this is the official break of the petrodollar, because you have to understand that the global oil network was set up after World War II. That's when they created this. The OPEC, that's when they created it, was in 1960. In 1975, after we unplugged from gold, we had a transition plugging in as the petrodollar. So we replaced gold, a metal, with oil, because prior to oil, the largest commodity index globally was metals. After we had oil, the largest global commodity market was oil. And that's when we created the petrodollar, because that's what humans, that's what society, that's what governments have always relied on, is they actually base their currency off of the most used commodity of the global society. Prior to oil, it was metals. That's why we have the Iron Age and the Bronze Age and all of these ages. Now, where we're at now is we are transitioning into the next pace of our economy. We're moving from oil to pure energy, because oil is energy, but you have to refine the energy out of the oil to use the energy out of the oil. We are now moving into a global economy that is actually based more on pure energy, whether it's solar, whether it's fucking wind farms, whether it's fucking natural gas, whatever. And solar, guys, I have been doing research. Solar is the level of efficiency that they now have in solar is absolutely fucking incredible. It is incredible where we are right now. And it's only going to get bigger. Now, the reason that the UAE is leaving the OPEC is exactly what that guy just said. They're looking at the future and they're seeing oil ain't it. That's why there's so many of the data centers in the Middle East. There's so much solar in the Middle East because they are transitioning to where oil is, it exists, it has a use, but the global society isn't so much oil reliant. That's why over in the Middle East, they have moved, or they are moving away from actually basing their economy on oil, and they're moving to the digital world, whether it's the data centers or crypto or everything that is digital, because we're moving into the age where the majority of the global economy is digital, whether it's money, whether it's AI. Have you seen how much money they're putting out for AI? Let's put it this way. Inflation adjusted, the rollout, the infrastructure for AI is 7 times larger than the 1950s U.S. highway project. Let that sink in. In the 1950s, the U.S. government, they built all of the highways all over America. They built a shit ton of highways. The U.S. highway system. This rollout, inflation adjusted, is 7 times larger than rolling out all of the highways in America. That's how big this AI fucking build out is. It's because that's the world we're moving to. This is the new system that we're moving into. And in that new system, that's why they, and I mean the word they, that's why they created the Bitcoin. Because they needed something that was accepted by the general public eventually as a digital reserve. And the agreement was that every country could get involved with it because of the decentralized mining aspect. Now, China didn't want nothing to do with it because it was launched by America. Now, is China mining Bitcoin? You're fucking A right they are. Iran, see, people don't realize how important Iran is. Iran is the largest mining country for the Bitcoin in the world. Let that sink in. Iran, the government of Iran, is the largest miner of all of the countries. They have been for fucking years. Why? Because Iran, were set up to basically kind of manage and run the relationship network of the oil industry. Because remember, the OPEC, Iran is a member of OPEC. They were there from the beginning. The reason that Iran even exists is the Strait of Hormuz. Iran was created for the Strait of Hormuz. And that's what's going on right now, is that old system, that old network, the petrodollar network, and the elites who ran the global petrodollar system, they are being replaced by the new technocracy group. Remember, they're all elites, but the group that ran OPEC and ran the petrodollar is not the same group that is the technocrats. So, where's that put us now? We're at war. And let me rephrase that. They are at war with each other. That group of elites, the old system elites, they're at war with the new elites, at war for the control of the AI digital future economy. That's what we're rolling into. And basically, if I could give you a representation of who you would recognize as as the technocrats and the old system. The old system is Sam Altman. The new system is Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a technocrat. Sam Altman is also a technocrat, but he is a progressive technocrat. And when you hear the word progressive, that's the whole label that you could put on the old system. Not Republican, not the Democrats, because you have progressive Republicans and you have progressive Democrats. Don't look for Republican or right or left. Look for the term progressive. That is the movement of the old system. The new system, the corporate technocrats of the new system, They are the futurists. They are Elon Musk. They are the guy who owns Palantir. That's them. So it's two separate groups. They're all elites, but there are two separate groups that are leading that. Are the old groups dying. That's what's going on in Iran right now, is they are breaking the oil out of the currency system. Basically, from here on out, the American oil will have an American price. The UAE oil will have UAE price. Prices of oil will be regional and not global. That's what Trump is. That's what Trump has set up with Cuba and like Venezuela, all of that. That's linked with this, which is linked with Trump's idea of the Trump doctrine, which is the Western Hemisphere, or as it's more, it's the Monroe Doctrine, which is now the Trump Doctrine, which is the Western Hemisphere, that America would run the Western Hemisphere and China would run the Eastern. Well, China with a sprinkle of Russia would run the Eastern Hemisphere. Now, Trump is taking care of the Iranian problem. He's eliminated the leadership of Iran and replacing them with people who are aligned with the next system. So he's basically kicked out the progressive leaders of the progressive movement in Iran. And remember, religion has nothing to do with whether you are a progressive or not. There are progressive Christians, progressive Catholics, progressive Muslims. The key is progressive. Now, word from the sponsor. Hang on one second.
Ever wondered how safe your online activities really are? How secure is your digital footprint? In the vast realm of the internet, privacy and security are paramount. Without adequate protection, your personal data might be at risk. There are solutions to these issues, and today we're going to talk about two of them. Introducing Liberty laptops from CALIX Solutions. These cutting-edge devices are meticulously designed to bolster online privacy, providing you the liberty to surf the internet incognito. The World Wide Web can be a wild frontier, but with Liberty laptops, your online privacy is always protected. We also present you crypto laptops, designed with cryptocurrency users in mind. Equipped to support a myriad of wallets and exchanges, these laptops are tailored for seamless cryptocurrency transactions. They offer enhanced security protocols to keep your digital assets safe. Crypto laptops ensures a secure and smooth cryptocurrency experience. It's time to take control of your online privacy and security. Venture over to CALIX Solutions and explore our Liberty laptops and crypto laptops. Don't forget, our affiliate program lets you earn $50 per sale. Visit calixsolutions.io now or call 7028458276 for more information, because your online safety is our priority.
All right, welcome back. All right, now guys, now on the second half of each show, what I'm basically going to do is show you the origins and the evolution of the progressive movement. That way, you guys have a historical reference of the system that was set up. That way, as you see some of the tools the old system used, they're using the same tools moving us into the new system. It's all social manipulation. So let's bring this up, and you guys are about to learn about the Fabian Society, the history, where it comes from, who's involved, and why. Here we go.
There is an organisation operating in Britain right now, today, that has supplied every single Labour Prime Minister in history. Not most of them, every single one. It currently has 141 members sitting in Parliament. More than half of the current cabinet belongs to it, and you have almost certainly never heard its name spoken on the news, never seen it discussed in a newspaper column, never had anyone explain to you what it is, or what it does, or how long it has been doing it. This is not a leak. This is not a whistleblower document. This is not some theory circulating on the internet at 2 a.m. Every number I just gave you comes directly from the organization's own website. They publish this information themselves. They are proud of it. The organization is called the Fabian Society. It has been running continuously since 1884. And what you're about to hear is not speculation. It is documented and sourced and verifiable. Every quote I use has a date and a publication attached to it. You can go and look every single one of them up yourself. The parts that are most disturbing are not the parts that required any digging. They are the parts the Fabians published themselves, under their own names, in their own journals, without any apparent concern about who might be reading. The wolf in sheep's clothing on their coat of arms is not something their critics invented to embarrass them. They chose it. They designed it. They put it on their headed notepaper and sent it out into the world. They were telling you exactly who they were. Most people just were not paying attention. This is the full story of the Fabian Society, who founded it, what they believed in their own published words, what they built, how the pipeline from their pamphlets to British law has worked across 140 years, and why their fingerprints are all over the government that is sitting in Downing Street right now, the 4th of January, 1884. 9 people gather in a room above a shop on Osnaburgh Street in North London. It is a cold evening, the kind of January evening that makes London feel like the oldest and greyest city in the world. Among the 9 are a children's author, a stockbroker, and a civil servant. They have just split from a group called the Fellowship of the New Life, which was essentially a philosophy club for people who wanted to improve themselves morally and spiritually before attempting to change the world. The Fabians had looked at that model and concluded it was entirely the wrong way around. Forget self-improvement. Forget personal moral transformation. They wanted power, direct, practical, institutional power. Within 16 years of that evening above the shop, they had helped found the Labour Representation Committee, which became the Labour Party. Within 2 decades, they had established the London School of Economics, launched a major political magazine, and written the foundational documents of a movement that would govern Britain for much of the following century. Within 140 years, they were still there, still formally affiliated to Labour in essentially unchanged form, and still, by their own published account, filling the cabinet of the British government. The name they chose for themselves tells you almost everything you need to know about how they think. They name themselves after Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, a Roman general and dictator who defeated Hannibal not through pitched battle, but through a campaign of relentless harassment and exhaustion. When Hannibal marched his army across the Alps and into Italy, and began cutting the Roman legions to pieces, Fabius refused refused to meet him directly. He kept to the hills. He cut off supply lines. He picked off stragglers. He waited. He wore the enemy down over months and years until the moment was right. And then he moved. His own people were so frustrated by the strategy that they nicknamed him the Delayer, Cunctator, and meant it as an insult. Yeah, but Fabius was proven right. The strategy worked. The Fabian Society took that name on purpose, and they took it seriously. Their motto, almost certainly written by a founder named Frank Podmore rather than any actual Roman source, was this: "For the right moment you must wait, but when the time comes you must strike hard, slow, patient, inevitable, and violent, in the political sense, when the conditions are finally right." They went through 3 logos across their history, and each one is revealing in its own way. First, the tortoise, with the slogan, "When I strike hard," slow and steady on the surface, but carrying real force underneath. Second, the wolf in sheep's clothing, which they elevated to a full heraldic coat of arms. This was not metaphor. This was their actual emblem, their visual identity, the image they chose to represent themselves to the world. They used it until even they recognized that the optics were becoming difficult to explain and quietly retired it around the turn of the 20th century. Third, the clean red square they use today. Simple, neutral, says absolutely nothing. You could look at it for a week and learn nothing from it. 3 logos across 140 years, threatening, then honest, then completely opaque. You can read the entire arc of their public communication strategy in that sequence alone. In 1889, they published Fabian Essays in Socialism, edited by George Bernard Shaw. The first print run was 1,000 copies and it sold out immediately. Within 2 years, 27,000 copies had been printed and distributed across Britain. But before the First World War, the number had reached 46,000, and the book had been translated into German, Dutch, and Norwegian. The argument at the center of the book was deceptively simple and deliberately reassuring. Socialism was not revolution. It was evolution, the natural and inevitable next step in the development of human society, arriving gradually through democratic processes rather than through violent upheaval. Sidney Webb, one of the Society's core founders, and perhaps its most productive member, coined a phrase to describe this vision: the inevitability of gradualness. That phrase is the key to understanding everything the Fabians have done across 140 years, and everything they are still doing. They were not trying to storm anything. They were not building barricades. They were trying to make their ideas the water that everyone swims in, so ordinary, so assumed, so embedded in the institutions and the assumptions of public life, that questioning them would seem not dangerous but simply eccentric. The work of the Fabian Society is not the work of agitators. It is the work of people who understand that the most durable power is the power that does not look like power. To achieve this, they invented a strategy they called permeation. And this is important to be precise about, because permeation is not a word that their critics invented to describe what the Fabians were doing from the outside. It is their own word used by their own members in their own publications with unmistakable pride. George Bernard Shaw wrote about it in 1892 in a published Fabian tract. He was not being cautious about it. He was boasting. He wrote that the Fabians had permeated the party organizations and pulled all the wires they could lay their hands on with their utmost adroitness and energy. In 1908, he became even more explicit. He wrote that the Fabians had set themselves 2 distinct tasks. The first was to provide a ready-made parliamentary program for any prime minister who converted to socialism. The second was to make it as easy and natural and unremarkable for the ordinary respectable Englishman to be a socialist as to be a liberal or a conservative. That second task is the subtler and more important one. Normalize the ideas, embed them, make them the default assumption, make it so that the debate happens entirely within the framework the Fabians have constructed, so that even people who think they are arguing against socialist ideas are arguing within terms that the Fabians established. That was not a hope or an aspiration. That was the explicit strategic plan, written down and published and distributed. Their own historian, a woman named Margaret Cole, explained the operational mechanics of permeation with unusual clarity. She said permeation meant converting key persons who were in a position to take action, and then she added the sentence that matters most. It was not necessary, she wrote, that these key persons should be members of the Fabian Society. Often it was as well they should not be. Sit with that for a moment. The people doing the work do not need to be members. They just need to have been shaped by members. They just need to carry the ideas forward without necessarily knowing where the ideas came from or who first put them there. That is how you run an organization of 6,500 people and end up with more than half the British government cabinet. The permeation did not stop at influencing individuals. The Fabians built institutions specifically designed to do the permeating for them over generations. In 1895, they founded the London School of Economics. Sidney Webb stated his intention openly and without any apparent embarrassment. He wanted to teach political economy on more modern and more socialist lines. That is a direct quote, and it is worth reading carefully. Not a school that would teach economics and arrive at socialist conclusions through honest inquiry. A school that would teach economics on socialist lines as the starting premise. The London School of Economics sits a short walk from Whitehall. It has trained generations of British civil servants, economists, and public intellectuals. It has trained prime ministers and finance ministers from countries across the world. It was founded by the Fabians, with Fabian money, with a Fabian mission, explicitly to push the teaching of economics in a particular direction. In 1913, the Fabians founded the New Statesman. The political magazine is still publishing today, more than 100 years later. A contemporary observer named Margaret Hay Thomas noted at the time that the magazine was being taken in by an enormous number of civil servants and was penetrating right through Whitehall. That was the point. The New Statesman was not founded to sell copies. It was founded to put Fabian ideas into the hands of the people who ran the country, and to do it so regularly and so naturally that the ideas stopped feeling like Fabian ideas and started feeling like simply the reasonable way to think about things. The reach of the organization went well beyond Britain. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of independent India, said in his own words that he had been vaguely attracted to the Fabians and to socialist ideas during his years in London. His mentor, Annie Besant, was a prominent early Fabian. India's post-independence economic policy, the state-owned heavy industries, the regulated private enterprise, the elaborate system of government licensing that came to be known as the License Raj, was built in substantial part on Fabian lines. And Lee Kuan Yew, who built Singapore from a trading port into one of the most prosperous and efficiently governed places on earth, studied at the London School of Economics. He subsequently rejected much of what he had been taught there. His own words on the subject were, like Nehru, I had been influenced by the ideas of the British Fabian Society, but I soon realized that before distributing the pie, I had first to bake it. That sentence contains complete critique of Fabian economics in 13 words. Even Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, was described as an avid member of the Fabian Society in the early 1930s, though historians have noted that his involvement appears to have been partly instrumental, a way of building credibility for a Labour parliamentary candidacy, rather than reflecting deep ideological commitment. One small organisation, founded above a shop in North London, shaping the governance of India, Pakistan and Singapore simultaneously, and that is before you even reach the part where they wrote the Labour Party's own constitution, Sidney Webb wrote Clause 4 of Labour's constitution in 1918. This was the clause that committed the Labour Party to the common ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange. Those words defined what the Labour Party was at its ideological core for 77 years. They were there through Attlee and Wilson and Callaghan. They were there through the defeats of the 1980s. They were finally changed by Tony Blair in 1995, and Blair justified the change using, naturally, a Fabian pamphlet. But here is the thing that makes all of this more than just political history. You can trace a direct documented pipeline from a specific Fabian pamphlet to a specific piece of British law, over and over again, across more than a century. The pipeline is not theoretical. It has a paper trail. In 1992, a young Financial Times journalist named Ed Balls wrote a Fabian pamphlet arguing that the Bank of England should be made operationally independent of the Treasury, free to set interest rates without direct political interference. Gordon Brown read it. He was impressed enough to recruit Balls as his economic advisor. On the 6th of May 1997, 5 days into the new Labour government, Brown stood up and announced Bank of England independence, from pamphlet to law in 5 years. In 2022, the trade union Unison commissioned the Fabian Society to develop a detailed roadmap for a national care service. The report was published in June 2023, 81 pages, 48 specific recommendations, designed, the Society made clear, with the relevant shadow minister actively involved in the process. In June 2024, a national care service appeared as a commitment in Labour's general election manifesto. Labour won the election in July 2024, pamphlet to manifesto commitment in 2 years, and the longest and most consequential pipeline of all runs from Beatrice Webb's Minority Report to the Royal Commission on the Poor Laws in 1909, the detailed blueprint for a comprehensive welfare state, through the Beveridge Report of 1942, which drew heavily on it, to the National Health Service Act of 1948, 39 years from the Fabian pamphlet to the legislation. Most think tanks and policy organisations write papers that are read by a small number of specialists and then forgotten. The Fabians write papers that become the law of the land. Now you might ask reasonably how an organisation with the membership of a small provincial cricket club manages to dominate an entire political party and the government that party forms. The arithmetic, when you look at it plainly, is extraordinary. Labour has roughly 400,000 members. The Fabian Society has around 6,500. That is 1.6%. Those 6,500 people supply 141 of 411 Labour members of Parliament, 34%. A third of the parliamentary party, drawn from 1.6% of the membership, and more than half the cabinet. Keir Starmer was a Fabian Society Executive Committee member before becoming party leader. Rachel Reeves was a former Executive Committee member. Wes Streeting was an Executive Committee member who stepped down when Labour won the election. David Lammy, Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper, Ed Miliband, Pat McFadden, Bridget Phillipson, Shabana Mahmood. Starmer was the first person in the history of the Labour Party to win the leadership while simultaneously sitting on the Fabian Society Executive Committee. He wrote his political vision document, the document that laid out what kind of Labour leader and what kind of Prime Minister he intended to be, as a Fabian pamphlet. The demand for that document crashed the Society's website. David Lammy stood at the Fabian Annual Conference in January 2024 and thanked them explicitly and publicly. His words were, "The support you've given to today's Fabians, Keir, myself, and much of the shadow cabinet." And in January 2025, the Society appointed a new General Secretary. His name is Joe Dromey. His mother is Harriet Harman, Labour MP for 42 years and Deputy Leader of the party. His father was Jack Dromey, Labour MP who died in office. One political commentator described him as one of Labour's Red Princes. The Fabian Society has an annual income of £811,000. It employs 16 people. Your local supermarket has more staff and less influence over the laws that govern your life. Now it is time to talk about what the founders of this organization actually believed, because this is the part of the story that stops being merely interesting and starts being genuinely disturbing. And the reason it is disturbing is precisely that it is so well documented. The people who built the institutions that shaped British public life, the people who designed the welfare state, who founded the London School of Economics, who wrote Labour's constitution, simultaneously and openly advocated eugenics. They argued for forced sterilisation. They argued for lethal chambers. They published statements about eliminating the people they deemed unfit for society. And they did not publish these things under pseudonyms or in private correspondence that only came to light decades later. They published them under their real names in mainstream publications during their lifetimes. They were not embarrassed. They were convinced. George Bernard Shaw, Nobel Prize winner in literature, co-founder of the London School of Economics, the man who designed the famous Fabian stained glass window, one of the most celebrated and widely read figures in early 20th century British intellectual life. In 1903, in the appendix to his play Man and Superman, he wrote that the only fundamental and possible socialism is the socialism of the selective breeding of man. In 1910, he appeared before the Eugenics Education Society, and his lecture was reported in the Daily Express on the 4th of March. He said that part of eugenic politics would finally land them in an extensive use of the lethal chamber. He said a great many people would have to be put out of existence simply because it wastes other people's time to look after them. In 1931, he sat down for a filmed interview for Paramount British Pictures, on camera, addressing the lens directly, as if speaking to you personally. Shaw said that he did not want to punish anybody, but that there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. He continued, "It must be evident to all of you that you must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board and say, every 5 years or every 7 years, will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you cannot justify your existence, if you are not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it cannot be of very much use to yourself." He said this on camera in 1931. He said it in the same calm, slightly amused, conversational tone in which he said everything else. Then, in 1938, he wrote a private letter to Beatrice Webb, in which he argued that they ought to tackle what he called the Jewish question by admitting the right of the state to make eugenic experiments by weeding out any strains they think undesirable. That letter was written in 1938. The Jewish question, weeding out strains. Yeah, 5 years into the Third Reich, while the apparatus of racial persecution was already fully operational in Germany. And then, in 1948, after the liberation of the concentration camps, after the photographs had been published, after the Nuremberg trials had laid out in meticulous detail exactly what eugenic thinking had produced in practice, Shaw wrote in the Atlantic Monthly about those he called the ungovernable, the ferocious, the conscienceless, the idiots, the self-centered myopics and morons. He wrote that the answer was not punishment. His prescription was this: kill, 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 kill them. Sidney Webb, the man who wrote Labour's constitution, the man who co-founded the London School of Economics, the man who with his wife Beatrice produced 1,000 pages of material in praise of the Soviet Union in 1907 in a Fabian tract called The Decline of the Birth Rate. Webb warned about what he described as degenerate hordes and the country slowly but surely falling to the Irish and the Jews. This was a Fabian tract, a Fabian Society publication, published under his own name. In the Eugenics Review, a mainstream academic journal of the period, Webb wrote that no consistent eugenicist could be a laissez-faire individualist unless he throws up the game in despair. He must interfere, interfere, interfere. H.G. Wells was a Fabian member from 1903 to 1908 and a founding member of the British Eugenics Society. In 1901, he published a book called Anticipations that he described as the keystone of his life's work. In it, he wrote about those he described as swarms of black and brown and dirty white and yellow people who do not come into the needs of efficiency. He wrote that the world is not a charitable institution and that they will have to go. And then there is William Beveridge. Beveridge wrote the Beveridge Report, the document that gave birth to the National Health Service, to the modern social security system, to the welfare state that has underpinned British public life for more than 70 years. His name is on buildings and lecture theatres across the country. There is a Beveridge Hall at the University of London. The Beveridge family is in every social policy textbook. He is remembered as one of the great progressive architects of the modern British state. He was also a member of the Eugenics Society. He sat on its consultative council until the late 1950s, meaning he sat on it after the Nazi death camps, after Nuremberg, after the word eugenics has been permanently stained by what it had produced in Germany. He died in 1963, and on the 16th of February 1943, while the House of Commons was debating the Beveridge Report in the chamber, Beveridge himself was not in the gallery. He had slipped out. He had gone to the Mansion House to deliver the annual Galton Lecture to the Eugenics Society. The title of that lecture was Eugenic Aspects of Children's Allowances. He stood before the eugenicists and told them that his welfare blueprint was, in his exact words, eugenic in intent, and would prove so in effect. The children's allowance provisions in the report, he explained, yes, had been developed with Eugenics Society's goals in mind. The aim was to encourage the educated professional classes to have more children, while making it harder for poor households to have as many. The architect of the welfare state presenting his work to the eugenics movement, reassuring them it served their purposes on the same afternoon that the House of Commons was debating it as a progressive landmark. The Eugenics Society, incidentally, did not fold when the idea became publicly unspeakable. It went through a series of name changes. It became the Galton Institute. It also became the Voluntary Euthanasia Society. And in 2006, the Voluntary Euthanasia Society rebranded itself as Dignity in Dying, which continues to operate in Britain today. The names change. The institutional thread connecting them does not. And Beveridge himself had been trained by the Webbs. He worked as a researcher on Beatrice Webb's 1909 Minority Report, the foundational Fabian blueprint for the welfare state. The Fabians then made him director of the London School of Economics in 1919. The pipeline from the Fabian inner circle to the eugenics movement ran in both directions and for decades. Now let us talk about what the Fabians wrote about the Soviet Union, because the record here is equally revealing, and possibly more so given how celebrated Beatrice Webb in particular remains in British progressive circles. In 1935, Sidney and Beatrice Webb published a book called Soviet Communism, A New Civilization, more than 1,000 pages, based in substantial part on materials provided directly to them by the Soviet embassy in London. They had visited the Soviet Union and been shown what the Soviet government chose to show them, and they'd come back and written 1,000 pages of endorsement. Notice the question mark at the end of the title. In 1937, the Webbs published a second edition of that book. That year was the height of the Great Terror. Stalin was executing an estimated 680,000 people. The purges were eliminating the old Bolshevik guard, the military leadership, the intellectuals, anyone who might conceivably represent a challenge. In that year, the Webbs published their revised edition. They removed the question mark. Soviet communism, a new civilization. No uncertainty. They were sure. In the third edition, published in 1941, they went further. They defended the purges themselves. Their phrase for what Stalin was doing to his people was that strenuous efforts had been made to cut out the dead wood. George Bernard Shaw visited the Soviet Union in 1931. 9 days. He was given a tour of Soviet achievements. He met Stalin personally for 3 hours and came away describing him as a Georgian gentleman. He told audiences on his return that Russia was a land of hope, while the West consisted of countries of despair. On the 2nd of March 1933, Shaw added his name to a letter published in the Manchester Guardian that denied the Ukrainian famine entirely. That same week, a Welsh journalist named Gareth Jones had just returned from Ukraine after walking through villages where the population was dying of starvation, and was filing reports that were being suppressed and ridiculed by journalists in Moscow who depended on their Soviet access. The Holodomor, the deliberate starvation of Ukraine as a consequence of Soviet agricultural policy, killed an estimated 3.5 to 5 million people. Shaw signed the letter denying it, while Jones was risking his career and his safety to report it. When Shaw died, the photographs displayed on his mantelpiece included a portrait of Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the Soviet secret police, a portrait of Lenin, and a portrait of Stalin. In December 1933, at a Fabian event reported by the New York Times, Shaw praised Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin in a single breath. His justification, delivered with his characteristic lightness, was that they were at least trying to get something done. As George Orwell understood all of this from the inside, he was a democratic socialist who had fought in Spain against fascism and against Stalinist manipulation of the left simultaneously. He was never a Fabian. He was never fooled by what the Fabians represented. In The Road to Wigan Pier in 1937, he wrote about what he saw as the real character of the intellectual socialist class in Britain. He saw the combination of theoretical egalitarianism with actual attachment to class privilege. He saw the Fabian version of socialism planned by experts and administered for the people rather than built by them as a path toward exactly the kind of society he spent his life warning against. But there is one specific incident in the relationship between Orwell and the Fabians that is almost never discussed, and that tells you a great deal about how the organization actually operates when its authority is questioned. In 1941, Orwell gave a single lecture to the Fabian Society. It was called Culture and Democracy. He wrote it out as a complete manuscript and handed it over to them. When the published version appeared, he discovered they had rewritten it, without asking him, without telling him, without his consent. They'd gone through the manuscript and changed it throughout, altering phrasing, removing passages, editing the text in ways that changed its character, and, in Orwell's view, misrepresented his actual views and his actual style. His letter of July 1942 describes the discovery in controlled but unmistakable fury. He wrote that besides cutting down several phrases he had used, they had gone all through his manuscript and altered every phrase, which revealed that he was delivering a spoken lecture. It gives, he wrote, a quite false impression of my written style. In 1949, instructing his literary executors while dying of tuberculosis, Orwell stated clearly that the lecture had been substantially altered and deformed all the way through without his knowledge or consent. He ordered it never to be reprinted. the man who wrote about the manipulation of language by institutions, had his own language manipulated by this institution. He went home and finished writing 1984. Yeah, whether the connection between those two events is coincidental is a question each person must answer for themselves. Now, all of that is history, and grim history at that, and you might reasonably feel that what the founders of an organization believed in 1890 or 1930 is not necessarily relevant to what the organization does in 2025, but there is a reason to look at the foundation before examining the building on top of it, and the reason is that the Fabian Society claims continuity. They claim it as a source of pride. They trace every Labour Prime Minister back to their membership. They celebrate the pipeline from Webb's 1909 Minority Report to the 1948 National Health Service as evidence of their long-term influence. They cannot have it both ways. They cannot take credit for the welfare state and disclaim responsibility for the eugenicists who built it. They cannot cite Harold Wilson and James Callaghan as Fabian achievements and then ask you to set aside what the founders published in the Fabian Journal under their own names. The continuity is the claim. The foundation comes with it. Every Labour Prime Minister in history has been a Fabian. That is the Society's own claim, made on their own website. Let us go through them. Ramsay MacDonald joined the Fabians in the 1880s, sat on their executive from 1894, and became Britain's first Labour Prime Minister in 1924. Clement Attlee was a Fabian member who had taught at the London School of Economics and who led the government that built the post-war British welfare state. But in the 1945 general election, 229 Fabian Society members were elected to Parliament. The Labour manifesto for that election was written by a Fabian named Michael Young. Harold Wilson was a Fabian member and chairman of the Society. 12 of his 20 cabinet ministers were Fabians. James Callaghan was a Fabian member, and reportedly every member of his cabinet belonged to the Society. Tony Blair was a Fabian member who published multiple Fabian pamphlets, including one called The Courage of Our Convictions, which laid out what came to be known as the Third Way. Gordon Brown was a Fabian member. Bank of England independence, one of the most consequential economic decisions of the Blair-Brown era, was enacted in his first week as Chancellor, having begun life as a Fabian pamphlet written by Ed Balls. And Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister, was a former Fabian Society Executive Committee member. He was the first person in the history of the Labour Party to win the leadership while sitting on that executive committee. He wrote his political vision document, the document that laid out his entire pitch to the Labour membership as a Fabian pamphlet. 7 Labour Prime Ministers, 7 Fabians. The Society states in its own published materials that Labour's 2024 manifesto was shaped by Fabian values and filled with Fabian policies, their words. Used to describe the document on which Starmer fought and won a general election. The Stained Glass Window is a story that deserves to be told because it is one of the stranger and more revealing moments in modern British political history. Shaw designed the window in 1910. It depicts Shaw himself and Webb standing at an anvil, hammering the world into a new shape, forging civilization by force of will and intellect. Above them, displayed on a red shield, is the wolf in sheep's clothing. Below the two men, smaller figures kneel and worship before a stack of Fabian books. H.G. Wells, who had quit the Society and was by this point openly hostile to it, is depicted in the corner of the image making a dismissive gesture at the whole scene, which suggests Shaw had a sense of humour about his enemies, if not about much else. The window was stolen from a Fabian country house in 1978 and disappeared entirely. It surfaced briefly in Arizona, then it appeared at auction in July 2006. On the 20th of April 2006, it was unveiled at the London School of Economics, the university the Fabians had founded a century earlier by Tony Blair, the sitting Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Blair stood in front of a stained glass window depicting a wolf in sheep's clothing and said on the record that a lot of the values that the Fabians and George Bernard Shaw stood for would be very recognisable in today's Labour Party. George Bernard Shaw, the man who proposed lethal chambers for people who could not justify their existence. The man who wrote about the Jewish question in 1938. The man who wrote Kill after the Holocaust. Those values, very recognisable. That is not an accusation. That is what the Prime Minister said. The question that the history of the Fabian Society keeps returning you to is the question of visibility. This is not a secret organisation in the way that a secret organisation is usually understood. The Fabian Society does not hide. Their conferences are open and attended by members of Parliament, journalists and lobbyists. Their policy papers are published and circulated. Their membership list is not concealed. Their connections to the Labour Party are advertised. They hold an annual conference at which senior cabinet ministers speak openly about the Society's influence on government policy and thank the organisation for its work. The paradox is that the most effective form of concealment is not secrecy, but normalization. If you operate openly enough, for long enough, in spaces that are considered legitimate and respectable, the question of whether what you are doing is appropriate stops being asked, not because the answer is obvious, but because the question itself starts to feel somehow ill-mannered. The Fabians have been operating openly for 140 years. The wolf in sheep's clothing stopped being remarkable to the people who are used to seeing it on the notepaper. That is the strategy in its purest form. Not hiding, but normalizing. Not concealing, but habituating. Making themselves so much a part of the furniture of British political life that examining them starts to feel like examining furniture rather than examining power. The Fabian Society is an organisation with an annual income of £811,000 and 16 employees. It takes in roughly the revenue of a successful medium-sized restaurant in central London and employs fewer people than that restaurant's kitchen. From that base, it produces the policy documents that become government legislation, fills the cabinet of the United Kingdom government, supplies every Labour Prime Minister in history, and maintains a formal affiliation to the governing party that has been unbroken for over 120 years. The arithmetic of that influence defies any conventional explanation. The explanation the Fabians would give you is that good ideas, well argued, find their way into policy regardless of the size of the organisation promoting them. The explanation the history suggests is rather more specific. The ideas reach policy because the people who wrote them, or who were trained by the people who wrote them, or who attended the institution founded by the people who wrote them, are the same people who are making the policy. The pipeline is not abstract.
All right, so that was basically the overview of the Fabian Society. And it actually goes on, and it actually is it repeats a lot of shit it already said, but very accurate. The issue is, and this is what we will talk about tomorrow, is the Fabian socialist of Europe. They who are linked with and created the progressive movement in the USA. And they are who created the universities we have now and how they act. And they infiltrated the US government just after the Civil War And tomorrow's episode will be the early progressive movement here in America. Then we will go through World War I, World War II, and then we will talk about the era after World War II. That era is where we Americans, we get very confused, because those were the good old days. That's back when we had jobs, we were building shit. That was the ramp up of the new system that is linked with the Federal Reserve, because 1929 was the American Great Reset of the money and the power. We will go over that tomorrow. Everyone, enjoy your coffee and have a great day. I will see you guys tomorrow. Love you guys. Bye-bye.
Ever wondered how safe your online activities really are? How secure is your digital footprint? In the vast realm of the internet, privacy and security are paramount. Without adequate protection, your personal data might be at risk. There are solutions to these issues, and today we're going to talk about two of them. Introducing Liberty laptops from CALIX Solutions. These cutting-edge devices are meticulously designed to bolster online privacy, providing you the liberty to surf the internet incognito. The World Wide Web can be a wild frontier, but with Liberty laptops, your online privacy is always protected. We also present you crypto laptops, designed with cryptocurrency users in mind. Equipped to support a myriad of wallets and exchanges, these laptops are tailored for seamless cryptocurrency transactions. They offer enhanced security protocols to keep your digital assets safe. Crypto laptops ensures a secure and smooth cryptocurrency experience. It's time to take control of your online privacy and security. Venture over to CALIX Solutions and explore our Liberty laptops and crypto laptops. Don't forget, our affiliate program lets you earn $50 per sale. Visit calixsolutions.io now or call 7028458276 for more information, because your online safety is our priority.